I'm interested in the macro here for people who are thinking about nickel. They've been looking at the market and going, hey, this battery revolution, this EV revolution, it's probably taken a bit of a whack here because of COVID. Yeah. You know, is now the right time to be investing in battery metals?
Yeah, no, I think it's the key is to get the right battery metal. And the one thing about nickel, it's not just a battery metal. You know, the thing that has created these super cycles in the past, you know, late 60s, late 80s, mid 2000s, and why we think we're going to see it again in the mid 2020s is nickel's primarily used in stainless steel, which has been a very high growth, 5 or 6% a year material for many, many decades. And so that's not going away anytime soon. Stainless steel is still just 3% of the carbon steel market. So that underlying demand force is going to continue going forward. On top of it, you now have this new use of nickel in electric vehicles. And I think, you know, the key thing for looking at commodity is, you know, it's not just about demand. You have to also look at the structure of supply. So, you know, the reality in the lithium space is there are, you know, vast dried up oceans of salts in various, you know, through the Andes and other places, you know, that can provide a significant amount of lithium to the market. Same thing with cobalt. There's a significant amount of lithium cobalt in places like Congo, you know, that can come to market at the right price and right time. So, and, you know, nickel, we have a big source of supply in Indonesia, but the reality is when you step back and look at how much nickel do we need to meet continued growth for stainless steel, and then you layer in forecasts in terms of how much nickel you need to make, you know, electric vehicle batteries. You know, there's nowhere near enough projects in the pipeline, including, you know, sort of developing everything you could possibly develop in Indonesia. And so the other key thing with again, in terms of your battery metals, I mean, lithium's always going to be on one side of the battery, but in terms of the mix and the cathode, you know, nickel is the element that gives the car the range, and it's cheaper than cobalt. So, you know, the industry has very rapidly shifted towards 80 to 90% nickel batteries from, say, 1/3 nickel batteries. That shift has happened much more quickly because of the spike in cobalt prices. So, you know, again, as an investor, you want to go to where the metal demand is going, not where it has been. And so, you know, in terms of battery chemistries, you know, demand is shifting to nickel, and it's going to continue to shift to nickel going forward.
So you think future demand will come entirely from the automotive industry? I know it's used in steel, but what's the kind of ratio there in terms of what the future demand looks like?
Oh, yeah, no, if you go out to, you know, 2025, you know, we're going to need about 500,000 tons more nickel, and there's about 2.5 million tons of nickel produced today, so about 20% more than today. But when you get out to 2030, you know, you're looking at, you know, 1.2, 1.3 million tons from the auto for EVs, and then you're going to need another 1.2, 1.3 million tons just to meet trend demand growth for all the other uses that nickel is used for. So that's double by 2030 what we're actually produced today.
Okay, and if you look at the use of nickel in batteries, obviously we're reading about Tesla reducing or trying to remove the need for nickel. And you know, I understand that different batteries have different functions, but you still think there will be a big need for nickel going forward.
Oh yeah, definitely. I mean, there's a whole flurry of news around Tesla using lithium iron phosphate for one battery. You know, I think I've said in some talking head things at one point or another over the last 8 months is, you know, the battery and battery system is the primary differentiator for an electric vehicle, just like the engine in a car. So, you know, in the globe, there isn't one single engine that's used in every automobile. So, you know, in the EV sector, you're going to see basically a low-end, short-range battery that's just as cheap as possible. And so that lithium iron phosphate is perfect for that. And you know, Tesla in China wanted to hit a specific price point, and range is not a big issue, in that market. You're going to have your mid-range battery, which will be more commonly used by 60% of cars. And then there's going to be this is the absolute longest range, the absolute highest discharge that'll allow you to go from 0 to 60 in 1.5 second battery, and you'll have different technologies there. Nickel will play a big role in both of those sort of the midstream and then sort of the upscale battery chemistries going forward.
Okay, so people are still excited about nickel. It has a part to play with battery metals. You think the demand's there, is what you're saying. Okay, so that's one thing. Timing. cycles.
Yes.
Okay, so you've talked to me in the past about these super cycles and being able to hit it right. I mean, if I'm quite candid, you started Dumont a long time ago. It's still not in production, right?
Yep.
So,
Yep.
And I get that you've learned some lessons about the geology and technically and so forth, but why is your project not going to take as long to develop?
Suffer the same fate? Yeah, no, fundamentally for two reasons. One is, Dumont was somewhat an evolution of a mining model, and so we needed to prove that evolution was robust economically, and could be constructed and built and done, in a very straightforward manner. So we had to spend, a bunch of time on engineering, a bunch of time educating investors and so forth, and we did that quite successfully, but that did take a bunch of time and cash to be able to do that. The second part is we were doing it during a time period, and we knew when I joined in 2010, I knew that nickel pig iron was going to be sort of 5 or 6 years of significant growth. And I can show you in a presentation I made in 2008, just saying how big nickel pig iron was going to be and what it was going to cost eventually when someone built a plant in Indonesia, which is what did happen. And so, again, there was just, we were advancing a project in a metal that people really didn't care about at that time. Today, the tables have flipped, 180 degrees. You've got BHP Billiton, who spent that entire time we were advancing Dumont, they were busy trying to sell their nickel business, and didn't have any takers, and in the last 24 months, not only has BHP said, we're committed to battery metals, we're actually building downstream processing plant in Australia. Their CEO was quoted as saying, we need more nickel, we need more future-facing metals, we need more nickel, more copper. And then, 3 months later, they put their money where their mouth is, and they acquired another large-scale, low-grade nickel project in Australia called Honeymoon Well from Norilsk. So, they've done a complete 180 degree. You have the world's leading mining company, committing capital, making acquisitions, in this space. And once one mining company goes, the herd usually follows. So we saw Oz Minerals do a transaction to acquire the 30% of a project called Nebo Babel. They acquired a company called Cassini Resources, which put a $250 million value on that. We already have a multiple of contained nickel and resource bigger than that project, and we have a huge amount of exploration potential to go. So I was very excited to see that transaction. I knew they were coming. I didn't think they would come this quickly. So, as of right now, the three good large-scale lower-grade nickel deposits in Australia are all gone. Yakabindi, BHP is now advancing that to fill in further as their Mount Keith mine winds down. Honeymoon Well's been acquired and Nebo Babel's been acquired. And so, literally, in terms of large-scale low-grade nickel projects in Australia, that's it of any scale. So I think it speaks, speaks in terms of what's to come for other large-scale low-grade deposits like what we have in copper.